So just to echo what Neha's already said a little bit, I just have to give such a huge thank you to the organizers for putting this together, to my family who made the 2-hour trip to be here and support me, and just to everyone who's here today, thank you so much. I can't believe that you came here to listen to me talk. Hopefully it's as good as I hope it's going to be. To everyone tuning into the lives, thank you so much. And I also just want to give one final thank you to my friend Shannon Ellertson. Some of you may know her from Instagram. It's Keto Shan. She's a graphic designer and an artist, and she helped me make my presentation not look like garbage. So thanks, Shannon. Okay, so just a little bit about me to get started. My name's Kelly, as we've already said. You may know me as Kelly_Keto from Instagram. I'm 25 years old. I was born in Trenton, Ontario. I spent 5 years at McGill in Montreal studying chemical engineering, and I just moved to Toronto in June to start my career in nuclear consulting. But nobody cares about that. That's not what we're here to talk about. Today we're here to talk about keto, and I want to share my experiences with following the ketogenic diet for a little over 2 years. So the way that I want to talk about this is I do want to talk a little bit about how I lost 100 pounds, because it's important for understanding how I'm now maintaining my weight. And then, I'm going to talk about how I lost the weight and how I maintain it, but then I want to talk about the keys to long-term success that I really feel apply to everyone and anyone who's following the ketogenic diet. I also have a frequently asked questions section, and then at the end I'm going to open the floor to questions. But before I do that, a lot of you know I am all about prefaces. So this is a preface, and it's just something that I want you to think about the whole time I'm presenting. Everyone has their own style of keto, and you should do what works for you. So I'm going to be sharing the way I follow keto that has worked for me, but there's a lot of things that people do differently. Looking around in the community, there's some people who choose not to eat any dairy. There's people who don't eat any artificial sweeteners. Some people follow intermittent fasting. Some people don't track their macros at all. Some people track everything. I follow a very if it fits your macros approach to keto, which means if I can fit something into my macros for the day, I'll eat it. So you can get ideas from other people, but ultimately you need to listen to your body and you need to do what works for you. So everything that I say today, I just want you to remember that I'm not saying this is what you need to do. I'm saying this is what I've done and it's what works for me. So just to start off, I want to talk a little bit about my experiences with weight loss. So to go all the way back, I was overweight for the majority of my life, and when I was 12 years old I went on my first structured diet. I went on Weight Watchers, and I continued to struggle with my weight throughout high school, and when things really started to get bad was when are you watching my story right now? Right here! Thanks Mom. So when I moved to Montreal to start my degree, I went into my first semester and I used a very typical excuse: I'm stressed, school is hard. And a lot of people talk about having the freshman 15, but for me that was more like the freshman 40. So when I came back after my first semester of university, I was at the highest weight I had been in my life. I was 240 pounds. And I just said to myself, I'm ready to do something about this. So I did a very typical thing. I said, okay, over the holidays, I'm going to eat everything that I want. I did that last hurrah sort of thing I'm sure a lot of us are very familiar with. And then I went back for my second semester and I said, this is it, I'm going to do this. So what I decided to do was not do proper research about how to diet, and I just said, I had read somewhere that women should eat 1,200 calories a day to lose weight. I didn't think about how much I weighed or how that related at all. And I also had read that, carbs are bad for you, so you shouldn't eat carbs. So I started eating 1,200 calories a day, doing a lot of cardio, and I was eating low carb, but I wasn't eating within the keto threshold of low carb. And I was also eating very low fat. So I was eating low carb, low fat, exercising a lot, probably netting somewhere around 800 to 900 calories a day, and I was very hungry all the time. I remember just loving the feeling of being hungry, because to me that meant that I was doing something right and that I was losing weight. So what I found in that time was I just became so consumed and so obsessed with calories and tracking and what was I going to eat next and when was I going to eat next. And I think I probably drove everyone around me crazy, because it was all I could think about, it was all I could talk about, and it was just not a healthy mindset at all. So I did lose a lot of weight very quickly. I think I lost 65 pounds in probably about 3 to 4 months. but it didn't feel good to me. So what happened was, because the way I was eating was so unsatisfying, I started to feel the need to incorporate cheat days, and it was something I read about online. You know, a lot of people that are dieting will have cheat days. So what they started as was me maybe going out to dinner with some of my girlfriends and eating a burger and fries or something like that. So it started off very innocent. But then over time, what started to happen was it wouldn't just be a cheat meal, it would be an entire day. And it wasn't just having the one meal, it was, you know, starting in the morning and just eating a lot for the whole entire day. But then because I was very obsessed with the number on the scale, I would weigh myself the next day, and seeing the scale bounce up 5 pounds overnight, then I would feel the need to restrict more heavily the following day. So that went on for a while, and I tried to keep the cheat days to a limit, but over time I just started to find that I needed them more because I was so unsatisfied with the way that I was eating. So that continued, and then I went back to school for my second year of engineering, and at that time I was living with my boyfriend. And what I started to find was that these cheat meals and these cheat days that I was having were starting to become a lot more frequent, and not only were they becoming more frequent, but they were becoming more secret. So I would feel the need to do it when there was nobody else around. And then at the time I wasn't quite sure what was happening, but what started happening was that I would be having these cheat meals, but it was a binge. They were binges. So I would come home after a day of school, nobody else was home, it was just me, and I would eat so much. And just to give you an idea of what a binge would be for me, it was, you know, eating 5 big bowls of cereal, followed by maybe like 4 slices of toast just covered in Nutella, chocolate-covered granola bars, jars of icing, and I would be eating all of this in a span of like 15 to 20 minutes. And I just felt it was very out of control. And I felt after I would do that, I would feel so guilty. So these started to happen. It started off, you know, once a week, but then it started to become any time I was home alone, I couldn't stop myself from doing it. And the thing about binges is that after it happens, you know, because with the volume of food that I was eating, I was in physical pain from how much food that I ate. But what's so much worse than the physical pain that you feel is the emotional turmoil that you go through after you do that. Because when you're in this place in your life when you want to be losing weight, but you know that every time you binge, you're hindering your progress, but you can't stop doing it. So I just became very depressed, and I was having these binges, and I just felt out of control, and like I was never going to be able to stop doing it. I didn't know what to do. And what happened was, and how this really came to a turning point was, because I was in so much physical and emotional pain following my binges, I started to think, okay, well, there was this little voice in the back of my head that would say, well, what if you just threw up? What if you just did it this one time, and then, you know, you won't gain weight from all of the food that you just ate, but you'll just do it this one time, and then you'll never do it again, you'll never binge again, let's just do this. So I would always push that voice away because I just said, this isn't a road that I want to go down, I can't do that. But over time, as the binges continued and they became, you know, every other day instead of once a week, that voice started to become louder and louder and louder, and it was harder to push it away. So then one day after a particularly bad binge, I found myself in the bathroom, just fighting with myself, and I was leaned over the toilet. I had a toothbrush in my hand that I was intending to use to make myself throw up. And I was right there. I was in that moment, and right before I did it, I guess something in my mind just snapped, and I said, "This is it. Like, I cannot do this anymore." I was that close to go, like, taking my binge eating disorder into binging and purging, which is just a whole other can of worms. So, following that day, I went and I said, "I can't do this on my own." So I went to get treatment. So I was very lucky that at McGill they have an eating disorder program. So I joined that program, and what they really encouraged there was intuitive eating. And if anyone in here has suffered from binge eating disorder, when you struggle with binge eating disorder, you really lose a healthy relationship with food, and intuitive eating is extremely difficult. So what happened was I joined the program, and I stopped binging, but I also stopped losing weight, and I started to slowly gain weight back because I wasn't able to eat little enough to stop gaining weight, but I was happy with the fact that I wasn't binging. But as I continued to gain weight, then I started to become very unhappy with myself again. So I would try dieting again, but every time I tried to diet, I would feel the binging tendencies coming back, and then I would have to stop. So I just felt that I was in this really dark hole that I couldn't pull myself out of because I couldn't diet to be happy with my body, because when I dieted, it brought back the binging tendencies, but when I wasn't dieting, I was just slowly gaining all of the weight back. So for about 3 years, I just felt so hopeless and like I was never going to be able to be healthy and happy. So what happened was I gave up. I just completely gave up on myself again. And I gained back basically all of the weight that I'd lost. And then for a long time, I was just very lost. But luckily, that's not the end of this story, and it gets a little bit happier. So in May of 2015, I moved just up the road to Pickering, and I was starting an internship at Ontario Power Generation. I was working in nuclear safety. And I said to myself, okay, this is my real opportunity. I'm not going to have any excuses with the stress of school. I'm going to be able to just go to work every day, work the regular day job, and then I'll have lots of time to just commit to working on myself. And because I was having all of these issues with dieting, I said, let's approach this from a completely different perspective. So I decided to approach it from a fitness perspective rather than the nutrition. So I joined a CrossFit gym. And it actually went really well. So for the first few months, I was just trying again with the intuitive eating, and because I was working out quite often, the weight started to come off. And then in August of 2015, my weight stalled a little bit, and my coach said to me, hey, have you ever heard of the ketogenic diet? And I had, and I said, yeah, I've heard of that. You have to give up all carbs. I could never do that, you know. You have to give up fruit. What do you mean? And he's like, well, why don't you just try it? And I'm a stubborn person, so when he said, well, I want you to try it, I said, okay, fine, I'll do it for 30 days. I'll show you how horrible it is, like, you'll see. So I said, I'll commit to 30 days. And by the end of the 30 days, I was having great results. Did I absolutely love the diet? No, but I didn't hate it. I felt fine. I felt good, the results were coming, so I said, let's just keep trying for a little while longer. There was no reason to stop. So then I started with 30 days, and now it's been 2 years and 4 months, and I'm still going strong. So thanks, Coach, for forcing me to do things that I don't want to do. So just, you know, in that second weight loss phase, I started off doing CrossFit 3 times a week. It moved up to 5 to 6 times a week by the end. And just something, you know, interesting about weight loss is that it's a very dynamic process. So I can't tell you this is exactly what I did to lose weight, because as my process continued, things changed along the way. So when I first started, I was doing what some people call lazy keto. I don't like to call it lazy keto because I think anyone who's making an effort to lose weight isn't lazy. So I actually like to call it intuitive keto. So that just means that I wasn't tracking my macros. I was just eating within the ketosis threshold of carbs and listening to my body and just eating intuitively. So then about 6 months into my keto journey, I was starting to have issues with the number on the scale continuing to go down. So I decided to incorporate macro tracking. So I was tracking my calories, carbs, protein, looking at everything. And around the same time, I also started trying intermittent fasting because it was just a really great tool that I had heard works really well with keto. So I did the 16-hour fast followed by the 8-hour eating window, and that worked really well for me. When I put in the macro tracking and the fasting, that really helped me zone in and ultimately reach my goal weight. And just something interesting to note about, you know, my style of keto is that I've always eaten a much higher protein style of keto. I know that there's a lot out there about eating high protein and stalling with keto, but I've eaten about 150 grams of protein a day since, you know, halfway through my keto journey. And something else interesting about the way I follow keto is that, you know, there's this number out there about 20 grams of net carbs. And when I was eating 20 grams of net carbs, I wasn't feeling satisfied because I like to eat a lot of vegetables. And I didn't feel that I could have enough at the 20-gram carb limit. So over time, I was slowly increasing that number, paying attention to the scale, paying attention to how I felt. And what I found was that I optimized my carbs around the 30 to 35 grams of net carb range, and that's still what I eat today. So I finished losing all of the weight in November of 2016, so it's been about a year now since I lost all the weight. So now what I want to talk about is how I transitioned into maintenance, because you don't just, you know, finish losing weight and then just know exactly what you're doing with maintenance. So what I wanted to do was, a lot of my goals, when I started at CrossFit, I got really into lifting. So I knew that fitness was going to be something that I continued to work on through maintenance. So the first thing that I did was a bulking and cutting cycle, and if you're not familiar with that, bulking means that you eat at a caloric surplus with the intention of gaining weight as muscle, and then you cut after, which is just cutting down to a caloric deficit again, to make sure that you're going to lose the little bit of fat that you will inevitably gain when you're bulking. So I did bulk for 3 months and then I cut for 2 months. But what I found was that bulking was very difficult from a mindset perspective. You know, when you come from having a history of binge eating disorder and when you've been losing weight for a long time where your goal is to see the number on the scale go down, when suddenly you're purposely trying to increase the number on the scale, it was very difficult. And I didn't like the way I felt. And in addition to that, to go from eating at 2,400 calories that I was bulking at, and then all the way back down to 1,400 where I was losing weight, honestly, it didn't feel good for me. So the best alternative to bulking and cutting is just eating at maintenance. You keep lifting, and then you're going to recomposition your body anyway. You'll still build muscle, it's just slower. But my thought on that was, well, this is something that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life now, so I'm not really in a rush. So I decided to just start eating at maintenance and keep lifting, and that's what I've been doing since June of this year now. So what I found with intermittent fasting, I said that was something that I did while I was losing weight. It didn't feel right to me when I was bulking because, it really suppresses your appetite. When you're trying to force yourself to eat a lot to gain weight, it just didn't feel good. So I stopped fasting. Sometimes I'll use it now just as a tool. Say I know I'm going to have a really big dinner. Sometimes I'll just fast for the day beforehand. But it's not something that I do regularly anymore. So in terms of how my macros adjusted, I kept my protein, that 150 grams, and then my carb limit the same because I feel very good at those numbers. So to increase my increased calories are just coming from fats. And then something else interesting about maintenance is just when I've zoned in on that number now that I can eat, the calorie number that allows me to stay the same weight. So I weigh myself a lot less frequently, and I just focus on how am I feeling and how am I progressing in terms of my goals. So setting goals is definitely something that's really interesting and important when you move into maintenance to keep yourself moving forward and looking forward. So now that's how I lost the weight and how I maintained the weight, but I want to talk about things that I think apply to everyone in the room that will make you successful in the long term, and there's 3 of them. So the first one is definitely mindset. I think it's so important to accept from day one, this is something that you're going to have to, continue working towards for the rest of your life. Because when you reach your goal weight, you're not just going to go, okay, and go right back to whatever you were doing before. You're going to have to make the intention to continue, paying attention to what you're eating or how you're working out. It's not going to stop. So accepting that from day one is really important. And something else that I would just really, really like to stress. I think that a lot of people have that, obviously everybody in here has bad days. There's definitely not a person in here that hasn't had a day where they deviated from their diet or skipped the gym or something like that. So what's really important is that you don't dwell or be hard on yourself following a bad day. So for example, I didn't binge for probably about a year and a half after I started keto, and then recently I had a very bad binge. And if you follow me on Instagram, I went on and I talked about it, and what's interesting is that there's that voice in the back of your head that will always say, oh, you ate a lot today or you went off your diet, so tomorrow you should just eat way less to make up for what you've done. Don't do that. Don't do that. Anytime you have a day where you deviate, it's just so important to wake up the next day or even say you deviate in the morning, that afternoon or that night, get right back on track with your macros. You don't need to punish yourself for making a mistake. We all make mistakes. And I just feel that that's so important. And be kind to yourself. Something that I always say is that you should speak to yourself the way that you speak to your family or friends. If my mom came to me and said, Kelly, I really messed up my diet today, I would be like, wow, Mom, you're a horrible person. That's disgusting, right? You would never say that to anyone, but we speak that way to ourselves, and I don't understand why. So if you make a mistake, just talk to yourself, not the way I just talked to my mom. Talk to yourself the way you truly would, and I just feel that that's so important, and positivity is just a huge part of that. And then the second thing that I've already sort of talked about is setting new goals. So when we're losing weight, our hard work is validated by seeing the number on the scale go down. But when you're in maintenance, I can say from experience, you don't get that same, yes feeling when the number's just the same all the time. You don't get that. Yeah, it's what you want, but it doesn't feel the same as seeing the number on the scale go down. So you need to set new goals so that, the work that you're continuing to put in is validated by something. So for me, that's been mainly fitness related, but your goals don't have to be fitness related. It could be anything you want. Maybe once a week you try cooking a new recipe to keep yourself excited about keto and having fun in the kitchen. Maybe you can work towards developing a better relationship with yourself, but it's just so important that you're working towards something. And then the third thing that I just think is really, really critical to long-term success is what I've already sort of talked about with finding your keto, that style of keto that works for you. You should just continue to change things until you feel, healthy, you're satisfied, you're happy, because if you're not, it's not going to be sustainable for the long term. Just like, my first little weight loss journey there, it felt horrible, so I couldn't keep it up for the long term. Continue to experiment and try new foods and products. Lately, I've been trying out different supplements and different pre-workouts just to see how I can optimize the style of keto that I follow. And finally, I'm going to try not to get too passionate and angry here. Don't let anyone tell you what's right for you. The keto police are all over Facebook and Instagram looking at your food and judging you and saying, that's not keto, that's not keto. You can't have artificial sweeteners and that's bad for you. People hate me because I eat margarine. I don't think eating margarine makes me a bad person. Apparently it does. So just don't let anyone tell you what's right for you. You know what's right for you. If the way that you're eating allows you to work towards your goals and you feel good, you feel happy and healthy, that's what you should be doing. So now I just put in a few questions that I get asked about a lot. A lot of people ask about carbs and maintenance. So a lot of people will say, well, when I finish losing weight, can I go back to eating carbs? Personally, I don't want to add in carbs because it doesn't appeal to me. Especially coming from my history of disordered eating really centering around carbs, I know for myself that it's not something that would work for me in the long term. So I choose not to do it. And because, like I said, it's something that works for me. I don't feel the need to change it. And just from another perspective, if you go beyond that ketosis threshold, you're going to be losing all the additional benefits that you get from the keto diet anyway. Because keto isn't just about losing weight. Yeah, it's great for that, but it's great for the energy that you get, the mental focus, the appetite suppression. And then there's a lot of people that follow keto just for health reasons or just for those added benefits. So, it's for me, I don't want to add in carbs. I'm not saying that nobody could or should, but personally, I choose not to. And then a lot of people ask about tracking and maintenance. So, when you get to maintenance, are you going to stop tracking all of your macros? And for me, I choose not to because I honestly find tracking to be liberating and it reduces stress for me. I find that when I'm just a very structured and rigid person, so having these guidelines that I can follow and know that if I do this, I'm going to be working towards my goals. That just works better for me. So I will have the occasional non-tracking days. Say, for example, if I know that I'm going to be having a holiday meal with my family, I'm not going to sit there and weigh out my turkey and stuff or the too many glasses of wine that I have with dinner. It's not going to happen. So I will have the occasional non-tracking days. And I will say that if you want to move into maintenance and stop tracking, it definitely would be easier because when you move into maintenance, you can eat a little bit more. Your calories do go up, so you have a little bit more wiggle room. So if it's something that you want to try out, I definitely think it would be easier than during the weight loss phase. And finally, people ask a lot about cheat days and carb ups. So my cheat days now are just the occasional high-calorie day, like I said, holiday meals with my family or something like that. And I choose not to have cheat days with carbs, like I've already said so many times because of my history with carbs and cheat days. But I do deviate from keto. The only time I deviate from keto is when I travel out of the country. So to me, a huge part of traveling is experiencing the culture of the country. Culture is very heavily tied in with food. So when I travel, which has happened, I think, 3 times in my 2 and some odd years of keto, I just completely went off. I ate what I wanted, I enjoyed the food, and the minute that I got back home, right back on track, and I didn't have any issues with that. I will tell you though that it's really impressive how much weight you can gain in a 1 week. But then it's also impressive how much you can lose because when you eat all the carbs on your vacation, you'll gain a whole bunch of water weight. I gained 20 pounds in I think 8 days.
I remember that.
You guys look horrified. I was too, trust me. So anyway, away from that, carb ups. Carb ups are this big, popular, bright and shiny thing in the keto community lately. I don't do them, and again, I just don't feel it's appropriate for me given my history of disordered eating. And other than that, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys have watched any, some nice mood music there. So I've watched some videos, I've done reading about carb ups, and all of the benefits that people claim to get from it, for me, just don't outweigh the risk. So for me, it's not worth it, but again, it's one of those things, try it, listen to your body, see how you feel. About today. Thank you so much for listening, and I would love to answer any questions that you may have.